Tonight's story is about a girl whose straight roommate keeps ruining every woman she dates until the truth finally comes out. Please enjoy this next video. The first time I realized my roommate might be sabotaging my dating life, I was standing outside a wine bar in a borrowed leather jacket, staring at my phone while my date texted, "You should go home. She sounds like she needs you more than I do." I read the message 3 times before it made sense. Then I looked up at the glowing sign above the bar, at the couples drifting in and out beneath strings of amber lights, and felt that odd, hollow pause that comes right before the truth arrives. Not the truth itself, just the pressure of it. The body noticing before the mind is ready. My roommate, Lena, had called me 4 times in 10 minutes. Lena never called unless something was wrong, or unless she wanted me home. At the time, I told myself I was being dramatic. I told myself she was anxious, oversensitive, a little too attached maybe, but harmless. I told myself she was my best friend and my roommate, and the person who knew exactly how I took my coffee, and exactly what kind of silence meant I was sad instead of tired. I told myself she was straight. That last part did a lot of labor. It explained why she climbed into my bed during thunderstorms and acted offended when I suggested she sleep in her own room. It explained why she stood too close when I got ready for dates, watching me in the mirror like she was trying to memorize a version of me she only saw when I belonged briefly to someone else. It explained why she got quiet whenever I mentioned the woman I liked, then louder when that woman disappeared. Straight, 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 a word I used like duct tape over every crack. That night, outside the wine bar, I finally called her back. She answered on the first ring, "Mara?" Her voice came out too fast, too breathless. My irritation evaporated. What happened? The power went out in the kitchen, and I think the outlet sparked, and now the fridge is making this horrible noise. I pressed 2 fingers to my forehead. Did anything catch fire? No, but it smelled weird for a second. Did you flip the breaker? A pause. I didn't want to touch anything until you got home. Until you got home. Not until maintenance came. Not until a neighbor checked. Not until morning me. I should say here that Lena was not incompetent. She was 28, worked in event production, negotiated contracts with people twice her age, and once threatened a shipping manager into locating 3,000 missing menus from a warehouse in New Jersey. She could build a seating chart for 200 guests in under an hour. She could parallel park a van. She could absolutely flip a breaker. But when she wanted me home, suddenly she was all wide eyes and fragile hands, and "I don't know what to do, Mara," in that soft voice she rarely used on anyone else. I closed my eyes. Inside the bar, my date, Rachel, a pediatric resident with a crooked smile and the kind of laugh that made me feel instantly more interesting, was probably waiting at a high table with 2 untouched glasses of wine. "Is it dangerous?" I asked. "I don't know." That phrase should have warned me. Lena said, "I don't know the way other people used smoke bombs." "Okay," I said. "I'm coming home." The relief in her exhale hit me through the phone. "Thank you." That, more than anything, made me feel trapped. Not because she needed me, because I liked being needed by her. That was the beginning of my problem, if not the beginning of the story. The story probably began 3 years earlier, when Lena and I met in the lobby of a building neither of us could afford. I had just hauled 2 suitcases and a dying fern up 3 stairs when one of the wheels snapped off and rolled straight across the lobby, like it had decided to start a better life without me. I remember standing there in sweatpants, staring at the suitcase tipped awkwardly on one side, when someone burst out laughing. I looked up, ready to be offended. Instead, I saw a woman with dark hair scraped into a messy knot, a white button-down half untucked, and paint on the side of one hand like she'd pressed it absent-mindedly against a wet wall. She had one box balanced on her hip and a grin she seemed unable to hide even while trying to be polite. "I'm sorry," she said, still laughing. "That was objectively tragic. Thank you for your compassion." She shifted the box and held out her free hand. "Lena, apartment 3B, Mara, also 3B, unfortunately. Perfect, we can begin our domestic life with adversity." There was something reckless and easy about the way she said it. Like intimacy was a joke she liked making before anyone else could. I laughed, and that was that. We moved in on a humid August afternoon with 2 sets of chip dishes, one overpriced couch from her aunt, and exactly enough money between us to afford rent if neither of us experienced a medical emergency. The apartment was small and oddly shaped with rattling pipes, terrible insulation, and kitchen tiles the color of weak tea. The living room window looked onto the brick wall of the next building, but if you leaned far enough left, You could see a sliver of sky. We were strangers for 2 days, friends by the end of the week. By month 3, we had already become the kind of pair people assumed had known each other longer than we had. She brought home dumplings when I worked late. I edited her impossible client emails. She started leaving me notes on the kettle. Your tea is stronger than your enemies. And I started buying the expensive yogurt she liked whenever she had a brutal week. Lena had that effect on people. She made closeness feel unearned and inevitable at the same time. It helped that we fit together logistically in the dull little ways that decide whether people can survive sharing a bathroom. She liked mornings and I liked nights. I cleaned as I went. She did intense once-a-week resets that involved music loud enough to qualify as warfare. She forgot to eat when stressed. I forgot to sleep. We covered different disasters. At some point, without discussing it, our lives started taking each other into account. There were grocery lists with 3 columns. Mine, hers, ours. There was a standing Friday ritual of takeout on the couch, and a terrible movie neither of us respected. There was the way she always texted if she was going to be late. Not because I asked, she insisted. But because apparently when she didn't, I developed the energy of a Victorian widow haunting the entryway. There was the way I could tell from the sound of her key in the lock what kind of day she'd had. Then there was the part I did not discuss, which was that I wanted her, not at first or not in a way I admitted. At first, I just liked her too much. Then I noticed things I should not have noticed if I were being emotionally responsible. The shape of the scar above her left knee when she wore shorts, the way she tugged one earlobe when lying, the look she got when she was concentrating on eyeliner, mouth slightly open, shoulders set with unnecessary intensity. Lena dated men the way some people test mattresses in a showroom, briefly, skeptically. Already half convinced none of them were going to work out. She called herself straight often enough that eventually I stopped questioning it. The first time I came out to her properly, not in the casual, obvious way I lived, but in the vulnerable way that actually matters. We were sitting on the fire escape in late October, sharing a blanket because the radiator had died, and our apartment felt like a poorly managed crypt. I had just gotten off the phone with my mother, who had asked if I was still in that phase, where I thought women were easier because they smelled better and listened. I laughed when I told Lena, but it came out wrong. She looked at me for a long second and said, very quietly, "Do you want me to come yell at your family or make you soup? What if I want both? Then I can multitask." That was Lena, too. Even her tenderness arrived wearing a joke. I think I fell a little in love with her right then, sitting on cold metal stairs while she held the blanket around both of us, and acted like my pain was an inconvenience she intended to personally eliminate. It was terrible timing. It was also manageable because she was straight, because she was my roommate, because women like me learned early how to turn longing into structure. You put it in a box, you label it something safe, you call it admiration or friendship or bad judgment, and you keep going. For a while I did, then I met Nicole. Nicole worked in archival restoration at the museum where I freelanced on design projects twice a month. She wore silver rings on nearly every finger and always smelled faintly like cedar and paper dust. We flirted for 3 weeks over broken labels and one suspiciously prolonged conversation about frame styles before she asked whether I wanted to get drinks after work. I said yes and spent the subway ride home, staring at my reflection like I had become temporarily too pretty to trust. When I got to the apartment, Lena was perched on the kitchen counter eating peaches over the sink because she claimed bowls made fruit taste supervised. She looked up the second I came in. "Why do you look like that?" "Like what?" "Like someone told you your enemies were dead." I laughed despite myself. "I have a date Friday." The change in her expression was tiny. It was also real. Her smile stayed, but something behind it pulled tight. "Oh," I echoed. "With who?" "Nicole from the museum." She hopped off the counter too quickly and turned to rinse her hands. "The one with the severe turtlenecks?" "Those are mock necks." "That sounds made up." "It's not. Do you like her?" The question should have been normal, friendly, curious. Instead, it landed low in my stomach. "Maybe," I said carefully. She dried her hands on the dish towel. That's a hostile noise." "No, it's a neutral noise." "Lena?" She turned, leaning back against the sink. "Okay, fine. She just seems a little curated, like she arranges old paper for a living, and probably alphabetizes her spices and says things like, 'I actually prefer the original translation.'" I burst out laughing. "You don't even know her." "Exactly. I'm working from instinct. Your instinct is rude." "My instinct loves you," she said lightly. So, it's trying to protect your Thursday night energy. Friday night, I almost corrected. Instead, I stared. She didn't seem to notice what she'd done. Or she did and chose charm as camouflage. Wear the green shirt, she added. Like that had been the point of the conversation all along. It makes your eyes look unfair. I should tell you that Lena complimented me like that all the time. Too beautifully, too specifically, not enough to justify hope. Enough to ruin me a little. On Friday, I wore the green shirt. I also wore boots I could walk in, lipstick I pretended not to have chosen for maximum kissing potential, and my good earrings. Lena sat on my bed while I got ready, claiming she needed to avoid the smell of the bathroom cleaner because it reminded her of an ex-boyfriend with a tragic condo. Too much? I asked, glancing over my shoulder after redoing my hair for the third time. She looked up from where she was pretending to scroll through her phone. That look lasted a fraction too long. No, she said, voice lower than before. Actually, maybe illegal. That helpful, huh? I do what I can. When I reached for my bag, she stood to wait, she said, and stepped close enough to tuck a strand of hair behind my ear. Her fingertips brushed my jaw. Heat flashed through me so fast I almost stepped back. Instead, I made myself stand still. You had lipstick on your hair, she said. That's deeply embarrassing. You're welcome, she smiled, but her hand fell slowly, like she wasn't entirely ready to stop touching me. I left with my pulse already damaged. The date itself was lovely. Nicole was funny in that dry, dangerous way that makes you pay attention. She asked real questions. She listened to the answers. We shared fries and one appalling dessert with too much rosemary in it. And by the end of the night, I wanted there to be another date. Then my phone buzzed. Once, twice, 3 times. Lena Nicoli noticed my face. Everything okay? Probably, I said, which turned out to be a lie. I stepped outside the restaurant and answered, Hey, what's wrong? Lena's voice came through thin and shaky. Can you come home? Every part of me snapped to attention. What happened? I think I locked myself out on the back stairs, and my phone is dying, and there's this guy downstairs acting weird. My stomach dropped. Are you safe? I'm on the landing. I don't want to be out here alone. That was enough. I apologized to Nicole, paid my share with clumsy hands, and left. By the time I got home, Lena was sitting cross-legged on our couch in oversized socks, eating cereal from a mug and watching a baking competition. I stopped in the doorway. You're inside. She looked up, startled in a way that felt almost theatrical. Oh-ho? She set the mug down. Mrs. Alvarez from 3A came up from laundry and let me in through the back. I stared at her. So, you're fine. I'm sorry. Her expression softened instantly. I thought my phone was about to die, and then she opens the door, and by then you were already on your way, and I felt stupid calling again. My anger arrived diluted by relief. That was Lena's gift. She could make you feel guilty for the inconvenience of her behavior. I dropped my bag. There was a weird guy downstairs. There was. He looked like he sold cryptocurrencies to cousins. I sat down opposite her, still breathing too fast. You made me leave a date. Her face shifted. You were on, actually laughed. Yes, the one I told you about. The one I was dressed for when you watched me leave. A beat. Then very softly, right? Something tugged unpleasantly inside me. She picked up her mug again, then set it down without drinking. How was it? It was going well. Was? I looked at her. She looked away first. Nicole gave me another chance after that, though the lightness had changed. It's hard to recover momentum when your roommate keeps becoming an emergency. The second date was coffee and a walk through the botanical garden on a Sunday afternoon. The weather was kind. Nicole kissed my cheek when we parted. I floated home stupidly happy and found Lena sitting at our kitchen table surrounded by invoices and color swatches. She glanced up immediately. Well, what? Did the sweater archivist enchant you? She kissed my cheek. Lena's pencil snapped in her hand. Not dramatically. Not enough for deniability. Just a clean, sharp crack. We both looked at it. She laughed too brightly. Okay. Wow. Cheap pencil. Then she stood. I'm making pasta. That night she put too much salt in the sauce and claimed the brand had changed. 2 days later, Nicole texted me, saying she thought I was lovely, but didn't want to get involved with someone whose home life sounded complicated. I read that line twice. Then I asked what she meant. There was a long pause before she sent, Your roommate called the museum and asked if I was serious about you. I stood in the supply closet with a coil of hanging wire in one hand and felt the floor tilt. She said you get attached and she didn't want me wasting your time unless I meant it. My entire body went cold. I left work early. When I got home, Lena was sitting on the living room floor assembling sample boards. One leg tucked under her, music low in the background. She looked up and smiled without caution. You're home early. I shut the door behind me. Did you call Nicole at work? The smile vanished. For 1 second, her face told the truth before her mouth got involved. Mara, did you? She put the board aside slowly. I just wanted to know if she was serious. My laugh sounded wrong even to me. You called my date's workplace? It was the museum. People call there all the time. That is not the defense you think it is. She stood, too. I wasn't trying to hurt you. Then what exactly were you trying to do? Protect you. There it was, the word she always used when she wanted control to sound noble. From what? A woman who liked me? A woman who might not have liked you enough. I stared at her. Something about her expression made anger split around something more dangerous. She didn't look smug. She looked desperate, which would have made me soften if I'd been less humiliated. You don't get to decide that, I said, her jaw tightened. Somebody has to. That sentence hung between us like a dropped knife. We both heard it. She stepped back first. That came out wrong. No, I said quietly. I think it came out exactly right. I wish I could say I confronted the truth then, that I saw the shape of things clearly and acted like a sane adult. Instead, I did what I had practiced doing with Lena for years. I reduced. I minimized. I called her overprotective instead of jealous. I called her boundaryless instead of possessive. I called us codependent in that cute urban way people say when they mean emotionally indistinguishable. And because she was straight, I let myself believe there must be some explanation that did not involve the one answer I wanted too badly to trust. So, I forgave her, or rather I performed forgiveness in exchange for peace. She cried a little, not enough to be manipulative on paper, exactly enough to make me feel cruel for staying angry. She promised never to do it again. Then she made me tea in my favorite mug and sat on the floor near my bed while I vented and looked at me like I was the center of gravity. That was how Lena operated. She could injure and soothe with the same hands. After Nicole, I stopped dating for 2 months. Not officially. Just in the exhausted way people stop trying things that keep ending in humiliation. Lena became easier during that period, brighter. Looser. She stopped asking who I was texting. She stopped hovering by the bathroom door while I got ready to go out with friends. She went back to her normal rhythm of half domestic, half chaotic devotion. She brought me pho when I got sick. She fell asleep with her head in my lap during a documentary and claimed afterward that I had trapped her there by being unusually warm. She stole my sweaters and returned them smelling like her shampoo. I had nearly convinced myself things were fine again when my friend Tessa ruined it. Tessa and I had known each other since college. She worked in public radio, had the kind of face strangers confessed things to, and possessed zero patience for delusion when it showed up wearing expensive shoes. We were at a Tuesday trivia night in a crowded bar with sticky floors and badly mixed margaritas when I mentioned, casually, that Lena had overstepped once with a woman I'd liked. Tessa set down her drink. Define overstepped. I did. The more I talked, the less normal it sounded. Tessa listened without interrupting. Then she leaned back and said, Mara, your roommate is in love with you or trying to qualify for criminal charges. I laughed too hard. She's straight. Tessa gave me the kind of look usually reserved for people who try to use mayonnaise as a personality trait. Okay, she said, and I'm a regional airport. Very funny. I'm serious. You just described a woman torpedoing your romantic life because she can't tolerate competition, or she's just attached. Attached people buy matching mugs. They do not call dates at their workplace. I looked down at the table. Tessa's voice softened. What do you think is going on? I took too long to answer. She noticed. Oh no, she said. You're in love with her. I covered my face with both hands. That is not the issue. It is extremely the issue. She's my roommate. And she is straight. Tessa was quiet for one beat. Then she asked, gently enough to make me furious, is that what she is? Or is that the word that lets you stay near her without having to ask for anything real? I hated her a little for that, mostly because she was close. A week later, I matched with someone on an app. Her name was Danny. She taught chemistry at a private high school, had the kind of smile that looked like she knew a secret you'd enjoy hearing, and seemed refreshingly unbothered by existence. We talked for 4 days before meeting for drinks on a Thursday. I did not tell Lena until I was leaving. She was curled at one end of the couch in leggings and an old concert tee eating popcorn straight from the bowl and half watching a renovation show. I'm heading out, I said. She glanced up. Oh? Date. Everything in her face changed and then changed back. Since when? Since this week. With who? Danny. What does Danny do? I stared at her. You're screening already. I'm making conversation. At the door? In shoes? She exhaled sharply and stood. Fine, don't tell me, have mystery. I grabbed my bag. I will, thank you. When I reached the hallway, she said, too casually, you look nice. I turned. She was standing by the couch, arms crossed over herself, expression difficult to read. Thanks. Her gaze moved over me once, slow enough to be a problem. Too nice, maybe. My pulse tripped. What does that mean? Nothing. And there it was again. Nothing, the favorite hiding place of cowards. The date with Danny lasted 2 hours and had real promise. She was funny, grounded, and unthreatened by my tendency to speak in paragraphs when nervous. We sat too close in a booth, traded stories about first jobs, and by the time we left, she was lightly touching my elbow every time she laughed. It could have become something. Then, as we were leaving, Danny asked, "Can I ask you something kind of weird?" "Sure. Why did your girlfriend text me from your phone?" I stopped walking. "What?" She pulled out her phone, apologetic. "She said she was your roommate at first, but then the messages got I don't know, intense?" She held up the screen. There, in a thread that started from my number while I had gone to the bathroom, were 3 unread messages sent 10 minutes earlier. "Hey, this is Lena, Mara's roommate. She won't tell you this, but she's really not in a stable place for dating right now. Please don't make things hard at home if you're just passing through." For 1 full second, all I could hear was blood. Then I said very calmly, "That is not my girlfriend." Danny's face changed. "Oh, that is my roommate, and apparently a demon." She laughed once in disbelief. I didn't know what to do. I figured either this was a bizarre joke or you had a deeply complicated situation. I do have a deeply complicated situation, but not because I wanted one. She slid the phone back into her purse. "Mara, I like you, but I do not have the emotional stamina for whatever this is." I nodded because what else was there to do? I went home vibrating with rage. Lena was in the kitchen in one of my sweatshirts stirring tomato soup, like a woman in a commercial for domestic trust. She looked over her shoulder. Did you unlock my phone while I was in the shower?" The spoon stopped. She went still before she turned around. That stillness was answer enough. "Mara, did you text my date from my phone?" Her face blanched. Yes or no?" "Yes." There it was. No performance, no detour, just yes, which somehow made it worse. I laughed, sharp and joyless. "That is a new level of deranged." She set the spoon down carefully. "I know how it looks." "I sincerely hope so." I panicked. "About what? Me having one nice evening?" She crossed her arms, then uncrossed them. "She didn't seem right for you. You spoke to her for negative seconds. I saw enough." "No, Lena. You decided enough because you always decide enough." Her eyes flashed. "At least I'm trying to stop you from getting hurt by hurting me yourself." Efficient, that hit. I saw it. But instead of backing down, she said the thing I would think about for weeks afterward. "You don't understand what it's like watching you give pieces of yourself to women who don't know how to keep them." The room changed temperature. I stared at her. She heard it too, in real time. The intimacy, the ownership, the grief buried under the words. And because she was Lena, because retreat was easier than honesty, she swallowed hard and added, "Too late. As your friend." Something in me almost laughed. I did not trust my voice enough to speak. So I went to my room and shut the door. She knocked twice over the next hour. I ignored her. She slid a note under the door around midnight. "I'm sorry. I know I crossed a line. Please eat the soup before it gets gross." I did not answer. The next morning, she had left a cup of coffee outside my door with the exact amount of cream I liked and a second note. "You can hate me and still hydrate." I hated that it made me smile. That was the awful thing about Lena. She could be monstrous and endearing inside the same 24 hours. We lasted 2 days in brittle silence before one of us cracked. It was raining, the kind of city rain that turns every sidewalk into a threat and every person into a bad mood. I got home soaked and found the apartment dim. The living room lit only by a lamp and the blue flicker of a storm warning on Lena's laptop screen. She was on the couch hugging a throw pillow to her chest. Thunder hit a second later. Lena flinched. Right. The storm. I'd forgotten. Lena hated thunderstorms with the intensity of someone who felt personally insulted by weather. I stood in the doorway dripping on the floor. She looked up. Her eyes were tired and wary and so familiar it hurt. "Do you want me to mop the trail of tragedy now or after the lightning stops trying to murder us?" she asked. I should have kept walking. Instead I sighed, took off my coat and said, "After that was enough." She shifted over on the couch without asking, making room for me in the spot where I always sat. A spot where our legs tangled if neither of us was careful. I sat because I had no self-respect. For a few minutes, we watched the weather banner crawl across the screen while rain battered the windows. Then she said quietly, "I really am sorry." I stared ahead. Which part? A pause, all of its specificity would help. Another flash of lightning. Another flinch, her voice got smaller. Doxing your date? Going through your phone? Acting like I have some right to your life that I don't. The honesty surprised me enough that I turned. She was looking at her hands. "Why do you do it?" I asked. She swallowed. "I don't know." I laughed once. "That answer is getting old." "I know, then try harder." Thunder cracked loud enough to rattle the window frame. She jerked at the sound, then looked annoyed at herself for it. Reflexively, before I could stop myself, I reached for the blanket bunched beside her and tugged it over both of us. Her gaze lifted to mine. That tiny moment of gratitude undid something in me. I had spent days trying to stiffen. She tucked the edge of the blanket around my knee like it mattered. "I think," she said carefully. "It feels like I'm losing something before I can even figure out what it is." I went still. "What does that mean?" She shook her head. Eyes on the TV again. I said, "I think, Lena." She laughed without humor. "That's the problem, Mara. Every time you say my name like that, I want to tell you things I'm not ready to hear out loud." That sentence sat between us, bright and unbearable. I could have turned, could have asked, could have set the whole apartment on fire with one honest question. Instead, I did what frightened people do. I let the storm speak for us. That night, she fell asleep with one hand loosely curled around the blanket between us. Like a child holding a treaty, I stayed awake for hours. After that, things became impossible in subtler ways. Lena stopped over at Sabotage for a while, but the emotional atmosphere of the apartment changed. Every kindness felt loaded. Every casual touch hummed too hard. When she squeezed past me in the narrow kitchen, my whole body noticed. When she sat on my bed folding laundry and talking about her day, my chest filled with the stupid ache of being known too well by someone who refused to name what knowing meant. I started dating anyway because spite is as good a survival strategy as any. Her name was June. June worked in publishing, had the smooth composure of someone who always knew where her passport was, and spoke in clean sentences that made me want to confess old crimes. We met at Tessa's birthday dinner and spent most of the evening in a corner, dissecting everyone's exes with the seriousness of historians. When June asked me out, I said yes. I did not tell Lena until the date was already on my calendar, which, in retrospect, was foolish. Accurates only make suspicious people creative. The date was set for Saturday. On Thursday, Lena came home with groceries and a bouquet of grocery store tulips, so orange they looked almost synthetic. She set them in a vase with unnecessary care. "Those are bright," I said. "I contain spring. It's November." Seasonal rules are oppression. I smiled despite myself and went back to cutting carrots. She leaned against the counter and watched me for a moment. "Are you free Saturday night?" There it was. I kept my eyes on the board. "No, I have a date." The silence that followed was so immediate it felt rehearsed. "With June?" she asked. I looked up sharply. "How do you know her name?" She blinked. "You left your phone on the table the other day and I saw a message preview." I stared. "You weren't trying to snoop." I wasn't. "Right." She dropped her gaze. "I know how that sounds." "You always know how it sounds after." Her face tightened. "Mara, no. Actually, say it. Explain why my personal life keeps ending up in your hands." Her mouth opened, then closed. Then incredibly, she said, "Do you really like her?" I laughed in disbelief. "That's your defense? Another assessment? I'm asking why? Because if she matters, that changes things." The knife in my hand hit the board harder than intended. "What things?" She did not answer. The date with June happened anyway. It was good. Better than good, actually. Easy. June had the kind of attention that made you sit straighter without realizing it. She didn't perform chemistry, she built it. By the second drink, I had stopped comparing her laughter to anyone else's, which in my life counted as progress. Then she said, halfway through a story about a terrible literary agent, "Your roommate is beautiful, by the way." I stared. "What? At Tessa's party?" She was there for like 20 minutes, right? Dark hair, dangerous shoulders, looked at you like she was trying not to start a war. I nearly choked on my drink. June smiled faintly. "It's okay, I have eyes." She wasn't looking at me like that. June's brows rose. "Okay." I should have changed the subject. Instead, I heard myself ask, "Like what?" June considered me for a second. Like every person in the room had accidentally been given access to something she thought was hers. My entire nervous system left my body. I laughed because that was easier than admitting anything. "She's just intense." June tilted her head. "Then your definition of intense is expensive." I got home at midnight and found Lena asleep on the couch with the TV on mute and one lamp still burning. There was a blanket over her legs and my old college sweatshirt bunched under her head as a pillow. She looked younger asleep, less controlled, more breakable. My anger had survived the evening intact, but so had something more humiliating. The urge to kneel beside her and smooth the hair off her forehead. I did not do that. I turned off the TV. Her eyes opened instantly. Mara? Her voice was thick with sleep. Sorry. Go back to sleep. She pushed herself up, blinking. How was it? There are questions people ask because they care, and questions people ask because they need to measure the damage. This was the second kind. Fine, I said. Her gaze searched my face. Fine? Good, actually. Something in her expression flickered and went dark. She nodded once. Good. That should have been the end of it. Instead, the next morning, June texted to say she didn't think she should see me again. No explanation, no transition, just a polite withdrawal shaped exactly like panic. I called her because by then I was too tired for pride. She answered on the third ring. I'm sorry, she said immediately. Did Lena contact you? Silence. Then, she came by the bar after you left. I stopped moving. What? She said she happened to be nearby, which I didn't believe for a second. I leaned against the kitchen counter before my knees embarrassed me. What did she say? June exhaled. Mostly that you were vulnerable right now and too kind for casual people. And that if I wasn't interested in something real, I should leave you alone before I made your living situation painful. My skin went hot so quickly I felt sick. I'm so sorry, she added. It was just a lot, and I don't do triangulated domestic psychodrama. Reasonable. When I hung up, Lena was standing in the doorway in socks and one of my t-shirts, hair damp from a shower. Everything okay? She asked. I looked at her. Really looked at the woman who had become the shape of my life. At the woman who borrowed my shirts and my breath, and still behaved as if my heart was community property. She had somehow been appointed to administer. You went to June's bar last night, I said. Her face froze. That was enough. Why? She said nothing. Why, Lena? Still nothing. Then finally, in a voice so low it was almost a confession already. I couldn't stand the idea of you with her. There it was. The room around us seemed to tilt toward the sentence. I stared. She swallowed hard and looked briefly, desperately, like she wanted to climb back inside herself. But the words had happened. What does that mean? I asked. Her eyes flashed to mine. For one impossible second, I thought she was going to tell me. Instead, she shook her head once and said, nothing useful. The force of my fury shocked even me. You don't get to do that. Do what? Say something like that and then hide behind smoke. Her chin lifted in defense. I'm not hiding. You've been hiding for months, maybe years. She recoiled as if I'd hit the right place by accident, Mara. No. You don't get to interfere in my life, scare off women who might actually matter to me, and then act like the emotional meaning of your choices is too private to examine. Her whole face crumpled for 1 second before hardening again. You think this is easy for me? That sentence changed me, because guilt and anger cannot coexist peacefully forever. Eventually, one eats the other. I stepped toward her, then explain it. She backed away not much, just enough to tell the truth. I can't or won't. Her voice broke. I don't know what saying it would do. I laughed, vicious and heartbroken at once. At least it would be honest. Then I did something I had been threatening in my own mind for weeks. I went to my room, opened my laptop, and started looking at studio apartments. I didn't do it performatively, didn't slam doors or make speeches. I just sat on my bed with my shoes still on and searched for ways to leave. Lena knocked 20 minutes later. When I didn't answer, she opened the door anyway. That was Lena, too. She treated boundaries like decorative fencing. She stopped in the doorway when she saw the listings on my screen. What's that? Math, I said, Mara. Apartments. The words seemed to strike her physically. You're moving out? I'm considering living somewhere my dating life doesn't require witness protection. She took one step into the room and then another. Don't do that, I turned in my chair. Why not? Because she stopped, that open wound of a pause. I stood. Because what? She looked at me with raw panic. Because this is our home. It was. Then you turned it into leverage. I never meant to. Intent is boring. That landed. She flinched good. I was tired of being the only one torn open by her uncertainty. If you want me to stay, I said, surprising both of us with the steadiness of my voice, then tell me the truth. She stared at me like I'd opened a door onto a cliff. I waited, her eyes filled, her mouth parted. Nothing. Finally, she whispered, I don't know how. I nodded once because there was nothing else left to say. Then I guess I know enough. She left my room without another word. For the next 5 days, We became careful strangers. Careful was somehow worse than cruel. Lena knocked before entering common spaces if I was already there. She texted to ask if I was using the bathroom. She left sticky notes instead of speaking if the message could plausibly be handled by paper. Out of oat milk, bought more. Your package came. I didn't open it because apparently that needs saying now. That one might have been funny if I weren't still furious. The apartment felt cold even when the heat worked. At night I heard her moving around in her room and had to physically stop myself from getting up and knocking on her door just to end the silence. Tessa watched this whole process with the grave satisfaction of someone who had predicted a train wreck and resented being right. "What do you actually want?" she asked me over soup on Sunday. The restaurant was crowded and loud and somehow still felt too intimate for the question. I stared into my spoon. I want her to either say it or let me go. And if she says it, I looked up. Tessa's expression did not soften. "Be honest," she said. I put the spoon down carefully. "Then I'm in trouble, because you love her." It wasn't a question anymore. I was too tired to lie. Yes. There it was, my own truth said plainly for once. Tessa leaned back. "Great, terrible, useful. Thank you for your nuanced support." "You're welcome. Now listen to me. If Lena is queer and terrified, that explains her behavior. It does not excuse it. Do not let your compassion become a hallway she paces while refusing to enter the room." I laughed helplessly. "Do you keep these speeches in a notebook?" "Yes, alphabetized." When I got home that evening, the apartment smelled like garlic and rain. Lena was at the stove making risotto, which felt emotionally manipulative even if it wasn't. She stirred with one hand and held a glass of wine in the other. Domesticity dripped off her like perfume. I leaned against the kitchen doorway. "You told me once," I said, "that lying to yourself long enough becomes a hobby." She froze. Very slowly, she set down the spoon. "I say a lot of things. This one was on the roof after your ex Nate moved to Seattle and you claimed you weren't upset while crying into a burrito." A tiny sound escaped her despite everything, almost a laugh, almost grief. "Okay," she said, "that does sound like me. Are you doing that now?" She turned. The look on her face almost undid me immediately. No armor, no performance, just exhaustion and fear standing upright in a human body. "Yes," she said, the honesty hit like weather. I stayed very still. "About what?" "About what I want, about what that means, about what it would change if I let it be real." Every muscle in me went tight. "And what do you want?" Her eyes went bright. Then she laughed once, jagged and miserable. "You, obviously you." The spoon slipped from my hand where I had picked it up without realizing. It clattered into the sink. Neither of us moved. I think some part of me had expected relief when she finally said it. Vindication. A clean line drawn through months of confusion. Instead, I felt everything at once: desire, rage, tenderness, shock. The specific heartbreak of getting what you wanted too late for it to feel simple. "You don't get to say obviously like this hasn't been a disaster," I whispered. A tear slid down one of her cheeks. She did not wipe it away. "I know." "No, really. You do not get to stand in my kitchen after terrifying off every woman I've tried to care about and act like I should have guessed right all along." "I'm not asking for that." "Then what are you asking for?" She looked at me for a long, ruined second. "I don't know." I actually laughed. Not because it was funny, because if I didn't laugh, I might have broken something. There it is again. "Mara, no, enough." I stepped back. "If you want me, then want me in a way that exists outside panic and sabotage and half sentences." She went completely still. I heard my own pulse in my ears. "I am done being the place you hide from your own life," I said. "If you want me, choose me while the lights are on." Then I turned and walked to my room on knees that barely felt attached to me. That sentence, "choose me while the lights are on," became the hinge of everything that followed. Because Lena, to her credit or maybe to her horror, listened. For the next week, she gave me exactly what I had asked for: space. No midnight hovering. No hand on my back when she passed in the kitchen. No climbing onto the couch so close that our legs had no choice but to learn each other again. She did not sabotage. She did not plead. She did something worse. She respected my boundaries so thoroughly that I began to understand how much of my daily emotional climate had always been shaped by her proximity. I hated it. When I came home from work, she called hello from her room instead of appearing in the doorway. When we watched TV, she sat in the armchair rather than sprawling beside me under the blanket. She asked before borrowing my charger. It was polite. It was excruciating. I had wanted proof that she could stop taking me for granted. I had not expected that proof to feel like frostbite. By Friday, I accepted a date with a woman from Tessa's office, mostly to remind myself that other lives still existed. Her name was Lena. She was smart, kind, and much too emotionally available to deserve becoming a chapter in my personal catastrophe. When I came out of my room dressed in a navy wrap dress, Lena was at the sink rinsing a wine glass. She turned at the sound. For one unguarded second, every careful wall she had built that week cracked. Her gaze moved over me slowly, helplessly, then she looked away. "You look beautiful," she said. No joke. No ornament, just truth. It landed harder because of that. "Thanks," I said. She nodded. "Have a good time." That was all. No interception. No crisis. No claim. I should have been relieved. Instead, I spent half the cab ride to dinner fighting the urge to turn around. The date was pleasant and doomed. Lena deserved someone who was actually in the room. I lasted 45 minutes before admitting, gently, that I wasn't ready for anything fair. She was kinder about it than I deserved. When I got home, the apartment was dark except for the stove light. Lena was sitting on the kitchen floor in gray socks, back against the cabinets, arms around her knees. At first I thought she was injured, then I saw her face. She'd been crying. I dropped my bag. "What happened?" She laughed weakly and scrubbed at her cheeks. "Nothing dramatic, sorry." "Lena." She shook her head. "I'm fine. You are literally crying on the tile." That almost made her smile, almost. I crouched in front of her before deciding whether that was wise. "Talk to me." Her voice came out ragged. "You asked me to stop acting like you belonged to me unless I was prepared to say why." "Yes." "So I stopped." The grief in that sentence hit me unexpectedly hard and? She looked up at me, eyes wet fox open in the awful way only truth can make it. And it felt like standing still while something was being taken apart inside me. I forgot to breathe. "I still didn't stop you," she went on. "I didn't ruin your night. I didn't text anyone, or invent a crisis, or ask where you were every 10 minutes. I just sat here and let it hurt, because if I'm going to say I love you, then that has to mean I stop turning my fear into your problem." The room went quiet around us. The refrigerator hummed. A car horn bled faintly through the window. I stared at her. "Love you. Not want, not can't stand this. Loathe." She heard it too and closed her eyes briefly, as if the word had escaped without permission. When she opened them again, she looked almost calm. "Broken, but calm there," she said softly. "Now you know." Something in me caved. I sat down on the floor beside her because standing had become impossible. For a moment neither of us touched. Then slowly, like she was asking without speaking, she leaned until her shoulder rested lightly against mine. It was the smallest contact. It felt seismic. "I left early," I admitted. Her head turned. "Why?" "Because I didn't want to be there." Hope moved across her face so painfully bright that I almost looked away. Don't," I said quickly. "Not unless this is real in daylight too." Her throat worked. "It is." "Then prove it." She nodded once. "That night we did not kiss. That is important, because there are stories where confession is enough, where one burst of honesty erases every injury that came before it. This was not one of them. We sat on the kitchen floor until our legs went numb and spoke like people trying to remove shrapnel without pretending it didn't hurt. She told me she had spent years forcing herself into versions of desire that felt legible, that men had been easy. Not because she loved them most, but because wanting them didn't ask her to rewrite the architecture of her life. She told me the first time she understood something was wrong was during my second year at the apartment, when I came home flushed from a date and sat cross-legged on the counter, describing some woman's laugh, and Lena had to go stand in the bathroom for 10 minutes. Because jealousy was too ugly to let anyone see. She told me she had kept waiting for the feeling to pass, that when it didn't, she made it smaller, then stranger, then meaner. "I thought if I never named it," she said, voice low, "then maybe I could keep you and keep the life I understood." I looked at her. "You almost lost both." I know, there was no defense left in her, just grief and finally willingness. I asked the questions I had earned. "Did you ever mean to tell me?" "Yes," she said, 100 times, but every time I got close, I panicked, because once I said it, you could answer, and if you answered wrong, I'd still have to live in the apartment where I lost you. That honesty hurt more than any performance ever had. So instead, you made me lose everyone else." Her face folded. Yes, I appreciated that she didn't hide from that. There is dignity in apology that doesn't run from the ugliest part. We talked until after midnight. When we finally stood, stiff and wrung out, she took one step back as if to preserve the line I had drawn. I saw the restraint. I respected it. I also wanted to scream, "Good night," she said. I looked at her for a long second. Then I said, "Good night." and went to bed alone, more shaken than if she'd kissed me. 2 days later, the city lost power. Not just our building, the whole block, everything went dark at 8:17 p.m., with a collective mechanical sigh that seemed to rise from the street itself. I was in the bathroom brushing my teeth. Lena cursed softly from the living room. Somewhere outside, somebody cheered like a blackout was a festival. I found Lena in the kitchen digging candles out of the junk drawer with unnecessary determination. She held one up triumphantly. See? Survivalist. You bought those because they're vanilla and in tiny glass jars. Preparedness can be beautiful. 10 minutes later, we were sitting on the floor by the open living room window, candlelight moving gold over the walls. Without lamps or screens, or the little domestic noises that usually filled the apartment, everything felt stripped down to the essential use. Our breathing, the city outside murmuring in the dark. Lena had one knee drawn up. I was leaning back on my hands, trying and failing to act normal. She turned to me after a long silence. Can I tell you something awful? I huffed a quiet laugh. At this point, that's our genre. A smile flickered over her mouth and was gone. The first time I got jealous, she said, wasn't Nicole. It was years before that. I waited. Her eyes were on the candle. You had a date with a woman from a ceramic studio, remember? You wore those stupid boots that hurt your feet and refused to admit it. I blinked. Carmen? Maybe. I remember wanting to set her scooter on fire. I laughed in spite of myself. Lena did not. You came home smiling, she said. And I remember thinking with total horror, this is what it's going to feel like every time. The honesty in her voice hollowed me out. I looked at her profile in the candlelight. Beautiful and frightened, and finally without disguise. Why didn't you tell me then? She shook her head, because I still thought straightness was a locked door I could hide behind, if I held it shut hard enough, because you were happy. Because I was a coward. Pick one, all three. She let out a breath that almost turned into a laugh. Yeah, probably. Outside, someone started singing from a neighboring building. Off-key, earnest. Human, the city seemed suddenly intimate. I turned toward Lena fully. Look at me, I said. She did, no deflection, no joke, just those dark eyes fixed on mine with a kind of terrified steadiness. Do you want me? Her face changed. I will remember it for the rest of my life, not because it was dramatic, because it was unguarded, all that longing she had hidden behind management and humor and crisis visible at last, and too exhausted to pretend otherwise. Yes, she said. The candle flame shook between us. I heard my own heartbeat in my mouth. Then why do I still feel like I'm dragging the truth out of you? Because I'm late, she whispered. Because I made a mess before I was brave. Because I still have this stupid reflex to protect myself, even when it's the one thing ruining everything. I could have kissed her then. She looked close enough to collapse into. Instead, I held still. I don't want another, almost, I said. I don't want a blackout confession you retreat from in the morning. Tears rose in her eyes immediately. She did not blink them back. I know if this happens, it happens because you choose it. Not because you're scared I'll leave. Not because I'm the easiest person to want in private. That one hurt. I saw it. Good. Some truths arrive with teeth. Lena nodded once. Hard. Okay. We stayed there a little longer, breathing the same charged air, then the lights came back. Just like that. The fridge kicked on, the lamp buzzed, the world resumed. Lena looked at me as if the universe had just performed a cruel joke. Well, she said faintly, subtle. I laughed so abruptly it bordered on hysteria. Then she did too. Not because anything was fixed, because sometimes tension becomes so total, the body has to choose laughter or collapse. The next morning she was gone before I woke up. No note, no text, nothing. And because I had spent enough time already inside the machinery of her fear, I decided not to chase her this time. If she wanted me, she would have to come toward me awake. Not in storms, not in blackouts, not through sabotage or panic. Deliberately. I went to work. I answered emails. I listened to Tessa describe a producer meltdown involving goat sounds and copyright law. I made it all the way to 6 o'clock in the evening before my phone buzzed with Lena's name. Can we talk when you get home? No emoji, no shield, just that. I wrote back, yes. When I opened the apartment door that night, she was already there, sitting upright on the couch like posture itself might save her. She had changed into dark jeans and a soft white sweater I loved on her, for reasons that should have embarrassed me more than they did. Her hands were clasped too tightly in her lap. She stood when she saw me. Hi. The apartment felt too small for the amount of feeling in it. I set my bag down carefully. You wanted to talk? She nodded, then, before I could prepare for it, she said clearly and without looking away. I'm in love with you, there it was. No qualifiers. No escape hatch. The sentence I had wanted and dreaded, my whole chest went tight. She kept going as if stopping would kill her. I've been in love with you for longer than I admitted, and I handled it badly and selfishly and sometimes cruelly because I was scared. And because naming it felt like setting fire to the version of myself I knew how to survive as. But it's true, it's been true, and I would rather tell you the whole ugly thing than keep hiding behind a word that stopped meaning anything a long time ago. I did not realize I was crying until I tasted salt. Lena's face broke at the sight of it. I'm not asking you to forgive me because I finally said the right sentence, she added quickly. I know I hurt you. I know I don't get points for honesty just because it arrived late. Her breath caught. She swallowed. I wanted to tell you in daylight. That did it. Not the confession itself, that line, the care in it, the effort, the fact that she had listened not just to my hurt, but to the shape of what I needed from her if there was any chance of rebuilding something. I crossed the room before deciding to. She went very still, not reaching, not assuming, waiting. Say the rest, I whispered. Her eyes searched mine. What rest? The part that matters. Understanding moved across her face like sunrise hitting glass. She drew in one shaking breath. I choose you, she said. My knees nearly gave out. She kept going, voice trembling and fierce at once. I choose you even though I'm scared. I choose you even though I don't have every word for myself yet. I choose you even though you would be smart to send me to hell for what I did. I choose you because every future I imagine where I keep pretending and lose you, anyway, already feels like grief. There are moments in life when the body answers before language can. This was one of them. I took her face in my hands and kissed her. It was not gentle at first. Not because I wanted to punish her, because relief has edges. So does longing when it has been made to wait. Her hands found my waist with a kind of stunned urgency, like they had memorized the route in secret and were still shocked to be allowed. She kissed me back hard enough to make the room blur, then softened all at once as if reverence had finally outrun panic. I felt her shudder when I moved closer. When we broke apart, she pressed her forehead to mine and laughed once, a broken little sound. You kissed me like you were mad. I am mad fair. Also in love with you, unfortunately. That made her exhale in a way that sounded dangerously close to a sob. Unfortunately, she echoed. I kissed her again, slower. This one felt less like collision, more like a door opening. We did not end up in bed that night, though not because I didn't want to. We sat on the couch, knees touching, and talked until the city outside quieted down. We set terms, boundaries, conditions for repair. No more speaking for me. No more secret contact with anyone I date or might date. No more using crisis as currency. If she panicked, she said so. If I felt mistrust rise, I named it instead of swallowing it until it turned acidic. She agreed to everything without defensiveness. That mattered. Then, around 2 a.m, she asked in a voice so careful it almost undid me, "Can I stay with you tonight?" The question itself was proof of progress. Not, "I'm staying with you." Not a dramatic crawl into my bed under the excuse of weather or bad dreams, a request. I looked at her for a long moment, then I said, "Yes." She followed me to my room with all the visible composure of a person entering a cathedral she's not sure she deserves. We changed separately, brushed our teeth side by side in bashful silence, and slid under the covers with more nervousness than if we'd been strangers. That was the oddest part. We had slept next to each other before, during storms, after funerals. Once after she'd had a panic attack so bad, she said her own room felt like a bad idea. But those nights had always been under false names, this one was not. She lay on her side facing me, one hand tucked under the pillow. In the dark, her voice came small and honest. I used to think being straight was the safest answer because it kept certain doors locked. I traced the inside of her wrist with one, and now? She exhaled slowly. Now. I think I was standing in a locked room, calling it safety while you lived on the other side of the wall. I swallowed hard. You make it impossible not to forgive you a little when you talk like that. She made a soft, guilty sound, sorry. Don't apologize for being poetic. Just don't weaponize plumbing again. That finally got a laugh out of her. She moved closer an inch at a time, like approaching something skittish. I met her halfway. Her arms settled around my waist with a kind of trembling certainty. I really am sorry, she whispered into my hair. For Nicole, for Danny, for June, for every time I let being scared become permission to be cruel. I closed my eyes. I know. It was not absolution. It was not nothing. The next morning was awkward in the sweetest possible way. We woke tangled together, blinked at each other in sunlight, then both laughed at the same time, because neither of us knew what normal looked like now. Lena was the first to recover enough to speak. "Well," she said, voice rough with sleep, "this is inconvenient for my heterosexual branding." I laughed so hard I had to bury my face in her shoulder. She held me through it, laughing too, and something inside me loosened all at once. Not the hurt. That stayed, but the terror that I had imagined all of this, that I had built entire cathedrals of feeling around a ghost. That loosened. She was real. This was real. Messy didn't mean imaginary. We told Tessa that afternoon over bagels. She listened with the expression of a woman watching a prediction achieve sentience. When we finished, she pointed at Lena and said, "I am still furious with you." Lena nodded meekly. "Correct then," Tessa pointed at me. "And I am happy for you, while also deeply annoyed you're proving me right in this dramatic of a fashion." "It's a gift," I said. Lena squeezed my knee under the table and looked like she wanted to be allowed to laugh. Tessa saw that too. Her face softened by a degree. "I mean it," she said to Lena. "Do not make her regret how patient she's been with your fear." Lena's answer came immediate and unvarnished. "I won't." Trust did not rebuild itself overnight, just because we had become honest and kissed about it. That would have made a prettier story. What happened instead was slower, more useful, more real. There were still moments when old patterns reached for us out of habit. A week later, at a coffee shop near my office, the barista flirted with me in a harmless, soft way while writing my name on a cup. I saw Lena stiffen beside me. The old version of her would have gone bright and cutting, maybe mocked the barista's haircut, maybe picked a fight with my choice of muffin just to redirect attention. Instead, she waited until we were outside and said, a little painfully, that made me jealous. I looked at her. She shoved her hands into her coat pockets. "I'm not proud of it. I just wanted to tell you instead of turning into an emotionally compromised raccoon." I kissed her cheek in the cold. "Thank you for not manufacturing a gas leak," she groaned. "You're going to say that forever, aren't you?" Almost certainly, there were harder conversations too. One Saturday, while helping her find an old invoice in her email, I accidentally saw a draft she had never sent months earlier. The subject line was, "I'm sorry, the recipient was Nicole." I went quiet immediately. Lena noticed because by then she noticed everything. I showed her the screen. She closed her eyes. "You wrote her an apology?" I couldn't decide if contacting her again would make it worse, so I didn't send it. I sat on the edge of the bed because suddenly standing felt difficult. The humiliation of that whole period surged up again. How stupid I had felt. How managed. How small. Lena knelt on the floor in front of me without hesitation. "Tell me," she said quietly. So I did. I told her exactly what it had been like to be watched and steered and made to feel like my own choices required review. I told her how much anger still lived under my love. I told her there were moments, even now, when happiness with her brushed against the old humiliation and made my chest hurt. She didn't interrupt. She cried once, silently, and let me keep going. When I finished, she put both hands over mine and said, "Thank you for not protecting me from what I did." That mattered almost as much as the apology, because remorse that wants to be comforted first is not remorse. It's image management. Lena, for all her flaws, was finally done with image, and there was joy too. God, there was joy. The first time she called me her girlfriend happened by accident in line at a taco truck. One of her coworkers ran into us and asked, "How do you two know each other?" Lena answered without thinking, "She's my girlfriend." Then she froze. I watched the realization hit her in real time. "I mean," she said, turning to me in mild panic. If that's I kissed the corner of her mouth before she could unravel in public. "It's good," I said. The relief on her face was so immediate it became adorable. "Great," she said breathlessly, "excellent." Carry on later, walking home under streetlights, she slipped her fingers through mine and admitted, "I've wanted to say that for months, and also for about 7 minutes, which is somehow the same feeling." I laughed and leaned into her shoulder. By winter, our apartment had changed in invisible ways. Her toothbrush stayed in the cup beside mine, because she was in my room more often than hers. She still left notes on the kettle, but now they said things like, "Your tea is ready and your girlfriend is devastatingly in love with you," in slanted blue ink. I still bought her Impossible yogurt. She still stole my socks. The difference was that now, when she called me her person, she kissed me after. One Sunday, we cleaned out the hall closet and found an old box of photos from our first year living together. We sat on the living room floor with dust in our hair and laughed at younger versions of ourselves we both wanted to shake. There I was on moving day, sweaty and annoyed, holding the corpse of my fern. There was Lena in one of my sweaters, asleep on the couch with her hand hanging off the cushion in the exact position it still fell when she was exhausted. Then there was a photo Tessa had taken at some long-forgotten dinner party, me in the kitchen reaching for a glass. Lena behind me with her chin on my shoulder, her arms looped loosely around my waist. We both stared at it. "That is ridiculous," I said. Lena made a pained noise. "We were already a case study. You could have saved us a lot of trouble." "I know, but then we wouldn't have this beautiful enemies to roommates to emotional liability arc. That is not a genre. It is now. Not everything became easy. Sometimes her mother called and Lena would go quiet afterward in ways that made old fear rise in me. Not because I thought she would stop wanting me, but because the world had taught both of us how expensive honesty could become once it left private rooms. Sometimes I still thought about June or Danny, and felt a flare of old embarrassment, sharp enough to ruin an hour. But we had made a rule by then. If something hurt, we named it before it had time to rot. So when I saw her tense because a woman at a holiday party touched my arm and laughed too warmly, I squeezed Lena's hand under the table. When she apologized later for being jealous, I thanked her for telling me instead of turning it into weather. When I got quiet after hearing a song Nicole had once sent me, Lena asked what happened and stayed present through the whole answer. That is what changed everything in the end. Not just desire, not just confession, practice. The repeated choosing of honesty over management spring came back to the city in dirty, stubborn stages. Sidewalk trees budded, the radiator stopped clanking, our upstairs neighbor resumed tap dancing badly at 7 in the morning. One night, almost a year after the wine bar incident that had first cracked everything open, I came home to find tulips on the counter again. Yellow this time, bright enough to look like optimism had become botanical. Lena was standing at the stove in my old sweatshirt, making noodles with the sort of concentration she usually reserved for emotionally significant grilled cheese. "What are those for?" I asked, nodding at the flowers. She looked over her shoulder, affronted. "I have a girlfriend. I'm evolving." I set down my bag. "Did you buy me flowers because you forgot the soy sauce?" She glanced guiltily at the grocery receipt on the counter. "Those are separate acts of character." I laughed and went to her. She turned in my arms before I could speak, like she had learned by now to trust closeness instead of staging it. "Hi," she murmured. "Hi." The kitchen smelled like garlic and ginger, and the rain that had followed me home. I looked at her properly. At the woman who had once hidden behind straightness like it was a locked door. At the woman who had hurt me badly, and then when she finally understood what fear was costing both of us, had done the much harder thing and changed. That was what I loved most in the end. Not that she wanted me, that she learned how to want me honestly. She touched my face with a tenderness that still startled me sometimes. "What?" she asked softly. I smiled. "Nothing. Just thinking how close you came to losing me because you were scared of the truth." Pain and gratitude crossed her face together. "I know. And?" Her hand slid to the back of my neck. "And I'll spend the rest of my life being grateful you made me say it with the lights on." That sentence reached all the way back through time to the couch, the blackout, the storm, the endless almost. I kissed her before she could see too much in my face. She kissed me back slow and sure, all panic gone now, replaced by something steadier and somehow more dangerous. Choice. When we pulled apart, she touched her forehead to mine and smiled in that quiet way that always undid me. "Come here, my girl," she whispered. Once, a phrase like that would have hurt. It would have sounded too much like possession without courage, intimacy without daylight. Now it meant something else entirely. Not ownership, the longing chosen out loud. So I went. And outside our narrow kitchen window, beyond the brick wall and the slice of sky and the city still busy teaching strangers how to want the wrong things, the evening kept unfolding like it had all along, ordinary, bright, and changed forever by the simple fact that this time, finally, neither of us was pretending.